A very warm welcome to Britain's favourite Sunday sermon with me, Richard Tice, on GB News. Amongst the many challenges we face in the UK and indeed in the Western world, I believe that the two most significant looking forwards is mass migration and the obsession with net zero. And I've got to let you know an experience I had this week after I presented Nigel's show on Wednesday. I semi-gate crashed a smart, posh dinner in a London hotel about net zero. Now, this dinner was held under what they call Chatham House rules, so I can talk about what was said, but I'm not allowed to say who was there. But I can give you a few clues. It was full of lords, MPs, very successful business people, and some of the biggest, most influential lobbyists, about 50 people in this room. I didn't actually have a proper place myself. As I say, I was semi-gate crashing. But I listened with increasing astonishment and horror at what was said by the various speakers. One of the speakers, he literally stood up and said that he regretted the United Kingdom was responsible for the Industrial Revolution, that actually led the world, that ensured that we made progress. We will lead longer, healthier, happier lives for billions more people around the world. And this guy actually regretted that the UK played a leading role in that? Really? They then said they didn't want to delay net zero like the Prime Minister referred to 10 days ago. No. They want to accelerate it significantly. They're full of scaremongering. They want us to eat less meat, of course, and they want to accelerate net zero. And there was no discussion whatsoever about, well, how we were going to pay for this. How do ordinary families, hard-working, tax-paying folk up and down the country pay for the madness of net zero? A cost, by the way, that KPMG says will cost every household at least £1,000 for the next decade and beyond. Another recent report, just out, says the cost could be way, way higher than that. And we all know how woeful the civil service and government departments and authorities are at predicting costs. I mean, just look at HS2. It was going to be 30 billion, then 60 billion. It'll probably end up nearer 200 billion. So the cost of net zero is going to be vast. They didn't care about that because, of course, they're all very successful people. All they were interested in this cosy dinner of zealots, they were literally zealot-like, was how they could make more money. Yes, this was a dinner of the vested interests, people who want to have a serious influence on the way this country heads towards net zero, and who want to make ever more money at your expense, your friends' expense, everybody's expense. They don't care as long as they make more money. I think it's absolutely reprehensible. Be under no illusion. This is one of the greatest battlegrounds of the future. If you think Brexit was a big battleground, was brutal, was tough, I know it was. But Brexit was an emotive thing. It was in the heart. It was an issue of patriotism, of belief in us as a sovereign nation. Net zero is completely different. It's a religion. They're turning it into a cult. These people at this dinner, they were zealot-like in their obsession to advance net zero. This is what we're up against. I think these people are some of the most dangerous people that are trying to influence what is going on in our country. I'm absolutely determined to be at the forefront of this battle against the madness of net zero. They didn't care. In fact, they were quite happy if we import oil and gas from elsewhere in the world, as long as we don't use our own oil and gas. They didn't care that that'll create 3 or 4 times more CO2 than if we use our own energy treasure. They don't care that thousands of steel jobs are being slain on the altar of net zero. They don't care that hundreds of thousands of automotive jobs are going to be slain on the altar of net zero. They bang on about green jobs. Really? Well, let's just look at the green jobs that supposedly is the great opportunity, shall we? The Office for National Statistics 2022 says that green jobs represent less than 1 in 100, less than 1%. So we've heard all this good stuff about green jobs. It's a nonsense. It's a fraud. It's a fake. The green economy, according to the ONS, is less than 2% of our GDP. Hang on, you say, what about all these offshore wind turbines we hear are the great, nirvana that we should be excited about? Yes, but who owns those wind farms? Over 80% of all the offshore wind farms are foreign owned. Many of them are built by foreign firms, overseas owners of the ships that service them. So a lot of these jobs, they're not British jobs. And meanwhile, tens of billions of subsidies goes to these renewables. Just remember, at this dinner of these zealots, they were absolutely obsessed with the idea that we were going to be world leaders. Yeah, we were a world leader in the Industrial Revolution. And much of the world is very grateful for that, but not these zealots. No. They want us to be a world leader in net zero, and that other countries will then follow us and respect us and admire us. Let me tell you, nations like India, like China, they're not respecting us for the fact that we've legally committed to net zero. They are laughing at our naive stupidity. As they build not 10, not 50, but 300 coal-fired power stations this year alone in order to produce cheap electricity, to create solar panels and manufacture wind turbines to sell to us so that we have the most electricity, the most expensive electricity. Why? Because it's not a coincidence. As the percentage of renewables that forms part of our electricity generation in the UK, also we've now got the most expensive electricity. Our electricity is around double in the United States. It's way more than France. It's about 4 or 5 times more expensive of the likes of India and China. How can we compete successfully when we are burdened with these high energy costs? But they continue to obsess with us being a world leader. Let me tell you, I'll repeat it. Other nations around the world are laughing at our naive stupidity, the absurdity of our Westminster leaders as they take our jobs, as they take our money, and as they ensure that the only zero you'll have is the amount of money in our children and our grandchildren's bank accounts. I promise you, this is a brutal battle. Why? Because there's so much money involved. And the vested interests at that dinner, they don't care about you. They don't care about your ability to afford it. They don't care that net zero is going to make us poorer. It's going to make us colder. They don't care that old, cold people sadly die early. As long as they're making the cash, that's fine by them. Remember, in my view, net zero is the greatest act of financial self-harm ever imposed on a nation voluntarily by its leaders. It's both financially negligent, it's criminally negligent. I'm going to be at the forefront of this battleground. Net zero is net stupid. And here endeth Britain's favourite Sunday sermon.